Chapter 111, Let's Get Married. Jian Yun had made an appointment with Wu Wenjing before she came and asked her to wait outside around 8:30. It was already past 9. She was worried that Wu Wenjing would be anxious waiting outside, so she prepared to call Wu Wenjing first. Jian Yun saw that her bag was placed on the chair beside Huo Liancheng, and she walked over to take her phone. Huo Liancheng seemed to know what she wanted to do. He said, "Wu Wenjing called you. I told her to go back first." Jian Yun's hand paused, but she still took out her phone. She wanted to see if Liang Beiqing had called her, but what disappointed Jian Yun was that Wu Wenjing was the only record of today's phone call. Liang Beiqing still did not have any news. Jian Yun suddenly felt a little worried. This kind of situation had never happened before. Did something happen to little uncle? However, this wasn't the time to worry about Liang Beiqing. She should leave this place first. With this thought in mind, Jian Yun no longer hesitated. She took out the bag containing her shoes from her bag, took out her shoes, put them on, and prepared to go out. Where to? Huo Liancheng did not even raise his head. Let's go home. Jian Yun was very tired and her head was dizzy. She did not even have the strength to argue. Come here. Huo Liancheng put the cigarette butt into the ashtray and crushed it. He ordered in a deep voice. Jian Yun did not move. She tightened her grip on the bag and said in a low voice, "Come here. I want to go home. I lied to you. I have never done anything like that. I will not betray myself for money." You have never done anything? Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows and pretended not to understand. He turned to look at Jian Yun. Jian Yun bit her lips and did not say anything. After a while, she said, "I do not want your money. I will not stay with you. Let me go home." There was a moment of silence in the house. Huo Liancheng just quietly looked at Jian Yun. Jian Yun lowered her head and stared at the tips of her feet. She gradually felt uneasy. Huo Liancheng slowly said, "You can't leave. Even if I let you go, Pujigang's people will not let you leave." "Impossible. I only promised to dance with him." Jian Yun was anxious when she heard that. She suddenly looked up. "You are so rude to his distinguished guest. Do you think he will let you go easily?" Huo Liancheng lit another cigarette. He narrowed his eyes and only took a sip before pressing it into the ashtray. His voice was very calm, so calm that no joy or anger could be heard. Jian Yun frowned. Her heart was conflicted. She knew that Puzigang could afford to open such a big club. He must have a strong background. She had heard that he had people in both black and white. In the past, there was a girl who resisted the guests like her. In the end, she was locked up by his people. She did not know what exactly happened, but the girl was sent to the hospital the next day. She was admitted to gynecology, and it was said that the lower part was cracked. Jian Yun's face turned pale and her hands trembled slightly. She gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "Then please tell him to let me go, okay?" Huo Liancheng sneered and said bluntly, "Why should I help you? What is your relationship with me?" Jian Yun's eyelids trembled and her body trembled. She had said this to him many times but did not expect it. He gave it back to her at such a time. It was really a good cycle of heaven and earth. "Then what exactly do you want me to do?" Jian Yun's tone softened. She was very afraid. She could not let anything happen to her. Otherwise, what would her mother do? "Come here." Huo Liancheng looked at her. Jian Yun looked up. She did not know why he wanted her to go there. Huo Liancheng got up and walked towards Jian Yun. Jian Yun nervously took a step back. He looked down at her and suddenly said, "Tomorrow we will register the marriage certificate." "Register what?" Jian Yun did not hear what Huo Liancheng said for a moment. Or, even if she heard it, she did not understand what he meant. Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows, and his handsome face was calm. He pulled Jian Yun's wrist and brought her to the table without any explanation. He picked up a piece of paper and handed it to her. "Take a copy." "I won't take a copy." Jian Yun was confused, and subconsciously did not want to take Huo Liancheng's things. She just frowned and stared at him. She reached out and brushed his hand away. "Aren't you going to take a look?" Huo Liancheng narrowed his eyes and looked at Jian Yun. He directly passed the paper to Jian Yun. Even if Jian Yun did not want to look at it anymore, the 4 big words on the top of the paper still entered her eyes. Marriage agreement. What did this mean? Who wants to get married? Jian Yun blinked, but still did not understand what Huo Liancheng wanted to do. Huo Liancheng put his hands on Jian Yun's shoulders and asked her to sit down. He put the pen in her hands and pointed at the bottom of the agreement. "I will sign your name here." Jian Yun suddenly reacted. She immediately threw the pen away and hurriedly dodged. "I will not sign. How can there be such a stupid woman like you?" Huo Liancheng was furious. He directly pinched Jian Yun's chin and forced her to look at him. "Don't you want to save your mother?" Jian Yun's face changed when she heard him. "How did you know?" She immediately remembered that he said Wu Wenjing called just now. Could it be that Wu Wenjing told him? "Marry me. I will find the best doctor for your mother and use the best medicine." Huo Liancheng felt that he had never been so humble in his life. There were many women who wanted to marry him. When did he need to use such a coaxing method? However, this woman still looked reluctant. It made him angry and depressed. Previously, she had repeatedly rejected him. Once or twice, he could still comfort himself that this was just a trick that she played. But later on, even he could not lie to him anymore. His charm had indeed failed her. She really did not want to accept him. But Huo Liancheng's words moved Jianyun's heart. She believed that he was completely capable of doing what he said, but why did he take a fancy to her? Even if she refused again and again, he still pestered her. This made Jianyun really uncertain. Huo Liancheng saw Jianyun hesitate, and he tightened his grip on her chin. He could not help but sneer. What are you worried about? Marry me. There's only good for you. No harm. But why do you get married? Jianyun could not help but ask the doubts in her heart. In her impression, these rich men did not seem to want to get married. Like that national husband, he had always been among thousands of flowers and never touched a single leaf. Even if they wanted to get married, it would be a marriage between a woman of equal social status. How could he be so casual as to say that he was getting married? I want something from you, Huo Liancheng patiently explained. He knew that if he did not give her a good reason today, she would suspect that there were more ghouls. She probably would not agree to sign the contract no matter what. What do I need you to pay attention to? Jianyun asked in a daze. Don't worry about that. In short, it doesn't do you any harm. It's useless for you to keep that thing. Huo Liancheng pushed Jianyun back onto the chair. Hey, don't tell me you want my body. The more Jianyun listened, the more she felt that something was useless to her. Could it be that he wanted her virgin membrane? Chapter 112, Hidden Marriage Agreement. Don't make yourself sound so capable. Huo Liancheng could tell what Jianyun was thinking when he saw her flickering eyes and abnormal expression. He smiled coldly. If I wanted to sleep with you, I would have done it long ago. Why wait until now? I really want to touch you. Do you think you can resist? Jianyun did not expect Huo Liancheng to be so direct. She bit her lips and her eyes flashed. She wanted to hide her embarrassment, but Huo Liancheng did not give her any face. He stared at her and said in disdain, I said my patience is limited. I was interested in you before, but you rejected me again and again. I will not give you another chance. Your beauty will not make me only like you. Jianyun's face turned black when she heard this, but Huo Liancheng did not finish his words. He glanced at Jianyun and curled the corner of his mouth. He said coldly, Don't think too much about it. I will marry you. There is indeed my goal. I am not interested in your body. It is easy for me to want a woman. There are many people more beautiful than you, purer than you, and better figures than you. In my eyes, you are only a little stronger than a fallen woman. Jianyun's face was already completely black. She gritted her teeth and mocked. What do you want? I will give it to you. Why force yourself like this? At this time, Jianyun also understood that Huo Liancheng probably did not take a fancy to her body. He kept saying that she was dirty and definitely thought that she was no longer a virgin. But other than this young body, she really did not know what else could attract him. Her character? This was even more impossible. She could tell from how he scolded her. I can't get such a thing for now. Huo Liancheng narrowed his eyes. How long will it take for you to get it? Jianyun was getting more and more confused. She almost felt that she had really taken his things, but more than a month ago, she did not know him at all and had never seen him. What did she have that was worthy of his coveting? 1 year. Huo Liancheng nodded the agreement on the table and signaled Jianyun to look. Jianyun then picked up the agreement and looked down one by one. Her expression also became complicated and strange. The first part of the agreement stated that they were going to marry in secret. They were not allowed to publicize the fact that they were married in any way. This was what Jianyun wanted. She continued reading. The second rule was that, although both parties had the name of marriage, both parties were not allowed to violate each other without consent. The scope included their bodies and minds. Seeing this, Jianyun's eyelids twitched. Huo Liancheng was so bad. No matter how good his skin was, she would not want to sleep with him unless her brain was pinched by the door. The following few rules were all trivial matters that needed to be taken care of during marriage. Jianyun could not help but glance at Huo Liancheng. This man looked cold and aloof, but she did not expect him to be so long-winded. The 9th rule was that the marriage lasted for 1 year. Within 1 year, both parties were not allowed to develop feelings with anyone. They were not allowed to betray each other. Otherwise, it would be a breach of contract. After a year, if both parties could not fall in a... Seeing this, Jianyun curled her lips. She would not fall in love with a man. The 10th, which was also the last, was, Jianyun only took one look at the property issue and frowned. She suddenly looked up at Huo Liancheng with shock in her eyes. You're crazy! Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows. He did not explain anything. He just handed the pen to Jianyun. Sign. If you divorce, give me half of the property. Are you crazy? Jianyun did not take the pen. She looked at Huo Liancheng as if she was looking at a fool. The Huo family was one of the top billionaires in the world. Even if he had not fully taken over the family business, the wealth he had created was enough to shock people. What did half of his assets mean? How do you know that I won't become poor after a year? Huo Liancheng stared at Jianyun, and the corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. Moreover, you may have fallen in love with me a year later and cried out that you are not willing to divorce. Then I would rather you become poor. Jianyun was annoyed. She took the pen and hesitated for a moment. She signed her name next to Huo Liancheng's name at the bottom. Jian Yun hated Huo Liancheng. She still remembered how he humiliated her tonight, but she had to admit that what he said was right. Without his help, she would not be able to get her mother's medical fees. And it was just as he said. Marrying him would not cost her anything. Based on this marriage agreement, it was very protective of her rights and interests. As long as she did not agree, she would not be violated. Once they divorced, she could still share his assets. Only a fool would not agree. Jian Yun thought angrily. Just because he humiliated her like this tonight, she would share his assets. He did not feel wronged. Also, Jian Yun agreed to sign at this time. It was not because she liked money. In her opinion, even if Huo Liancheng gave half of the property to her in this marriage agreement, she could not think about it deeply. They had been in the business for many years, and were all smart people. How could they agree to such an obvious, unfair condition? Therefore, it could only be that he had already made a fuss about it. Perhaps when the time came for the divorce, his assets would have been transferred out a long time ago. However, Jian Yun did not care. She did not know what Huo Liancheng wanted from her. As long as he was willing to give her money to save her mother, it would be fine, as long as he could relieve her urgent need. When Huo Liancheng saw Jian Yun sign her name, his eyes could not help but soften. He handed over another piece of paper. Kobe. Jian Yun really wanted to ask him why he did not print it out, but she really did not want to talk to him. Therefore, other than the name and identity of the woman at the beginning, she copied everything else. However, Jian Yun quickly realized that something was wrong. She looked at Huo Liancheng hesitantly. How do you know my ID number? You have an ID in your wallet. Huo Liancheng replied plainly and turned away. Jian Yun still felt that something was strange. Her ID was in her wallet, but when he wrote it, he did not seem to compare it with her ID. But Jian Yun immediately snorted at her suspicion. Maybe he saw it when she was taking a bath. What was she thinking? Could it be that she hoped that he would secretly remember her identity card? A few minutes later, Jian Yun finished copying the agreement and signed her name. She looked at the two copies of the same content in her hands. Huo Liancheng's handwriting was very beautiful. The tip of his brush was strong and vigorous. It gave people a fierce and domineering feeling. Jian Yun's handwriting was neat and beautiful, but the edges and corners could be seen in the fine details. She was just like her usual gentle and generous demeanor. Once she was provoked, her whole body would be covered with thorns. She hurt others and herself. For a moment, Jian Yun was a little absent-minded. She still could not accept Huo Liancheng's different behavior tonight. They were clearly very noisy. When he scolded her, she wanted to use a stool to smash him to death. Why did they suddenly sign a marriage contract to be registered? She seemed to be dreaming. Why does this seem to be the relationship between the investors and Canary? Jian Yun muttered. Chapter 113, Dirty and Shameless. Xiao Huo. Jian Yun was in a daze when she suddenly felt the darkness in front of her eyes. There was a unique fragrance of a man's body assaulting her nose. In a flash, she saw Huo Liancheng take a pen from her hand and sign the 3 words, Huo Liancheng, under the contract she had just copied. There's porridge on the table. Go eat and sleep after eating. Huo Liancheng carefully checked the 2 contracts and conveniently put them away. He said to Jian Yun in a light voice. Jian Yun turned her head to look and saw a small blue cup on the table to the right of the door. The lid was open and waves of fragrance flowed out. When did this porridge come in? Why didn't she know? What are you still standing there for? Huo Liancheng saw Jian Yun sitting still and could not help but ask coldly. Jian Yun touched her stomach. She had only eaten 1 steamed bun in the evening today. She seemed to be a little hungry, so she did not object. She got up and walked over, but she stopped after eating 2 mouthfuls. What's wrong? Huo Liancheng asked. Jian Yun shook her head. I can't eat it. She had not had a good meal since her mother was sick. She had been hungry for a long time, and now she smelled the food and felt nauseous. Even if you can't eat it, you have to eat it? Huo Liancheng put away the agreement and walked to Jian Yun's side. He seemed to want to watch her eat. I don't want to take you to the hospital. Jian Yun glared at Huo Liancheng with hatred. She grabbed the spoon and tried hard to resist the disgusting feeling. She ate fiercely as if she was venting her anger. When there was only half a bowl of porridge left in the cup, Jian Yun put down the spoon with a bitter face. She really could not take it anymore. Sleep. Huo Liancheng did not force Jian Yun anymore. He unbuttoned his shirt as he walked. Jian Yun saw him enter the bathroom. She knew that she would not be able to leave tonight, so she gave up struggling. Anyway, this was a suite. They were separated from each other, and each had a bed. She would sleep with this outside. When the time came, she would lock the door. She was not afraid of what Huo Liancheng would do. When Huo Liancheng came out of the bathroom, he only had a towel wrapped around his waist. His upper body was exposed. He had an inverted triangle shape. His shoulders were wide, and his waist was thin. The lines on his arms were smooth and tight. His muscles were clear and full of strength. Under his strong chest muscles that were separated like ditches, the waistline was very tight. His 8 abs were very eye-catching, especially his short hair that was dripping water. At that time, Jian Yun was calling Wu Wenjing. Although Hu Liancheng had already asked Wu Wenjing to go back, Jian Yun felt that it was better for her to personally tell Wu Wenjing to be at ease. She and Wu Wenjing understood each other and did not ask or say anything. Jian Yun was about to hang up when she heard the bathroom door ring. She turned her head casually and suddenly saw Hu Liancheng walking out with his long legs. Jian Yun was shocked and did not know how to react. She stared straight at him and gradually felt the heat on her face. When she came back to her senses, she hurriedly turned around and was embarrassed to look again. Hu Liancheng did not even look at Jian Yun. He looked straight ahead and swaggered into the large suite. "Jian Yun, what are you doing?" On the other side of the phone, Wu Wenjing did not hear anything for a long time and could not help calling out. Jian Yun replied to her hand and suddenly found that her hand was empty. She looked down and saw that her phone had fallen on the table. Jian Yun felt a little embarrassed. It was not because Hu Liancheng had such a beauty, but because she felt ashamed that she was looking at him in a daze. This guy was so bad. He must have done it on purpose just now. After the call with Wu Wenjing, Jian Yun was really tired. Originally, her body was weak, and she was barely able to dance until she was at the end of her rope. But later, when she had such an intense argument with Hu Liancheng, Jian Yun's body and mind had reached the limit of what she could bear. Furthermore, her mother's medical fees had been settled, and it made her tense heart suddenly relax. As soon as she lay down, her eyelids could not open. But Jian Yun still vigilantly pulled out the key to the door and locked it from the inside. She had to be wary of small people and even a gentleman. She did not care if Hu Liancheng was a gentleman or a small person, she should be wary of him. The night gradually turned dark. The suite was quiet. Suddenly a black shadow came out of the big room and stopped at the door where Jian Yun was. He reached out to twist the door handle and found that the door was locked from the inside. Hu Liancheng's expression did not change. He did not know where he got a wire from. He put it into the lock and fiddled with it a few times before turning the handle. The door that was locked opened. He casually threw the wire into the bonsai at the side and pushed the door in. The wall lamp in the room was not turned off. Under the dim light, Hu Liancheng saw Jian Yun lying on the side of the bed. She had fallen asleep. The raven's long hair was spread on the white pillow like a fine brocade. Her face was very beautiful. Her thick and slender mascara feathers were like fans, casting a faint shadow on her face. Hu Liancheng stood quietly by the bed, just like that time when he pretended to be drunk and was brought home by her. He looked at her as if he could not see her enough. From the moment he met her, he really wanted to hold her in his arms. Unfortunately, his appearance and wealth that all women craved had become useless to her. He did not even know the structure of this girl's brain. He really wanted to knock her head open and see why she did not like him. Hu Liancheng did not know how long he had stood there, but Jian Yun, who was sleeping soundly, did not know anything about it. In the haze, she turned over. Half of the blanket was kicked off by her, and one of her smooth legs was exposed. Before coming here, Jian Yun did not expect to meet Hu Liancheng. She did not expect to spend the night here, so she did not bring any clothes to change her clothes. But when she was sleeping, she could still wear a shirt. The jeans wrapped around her body was really uncomfortable, so Jian Yun took off her pants. She also saw that she had locked the door, and Hu Liancheng did not show any interest in her, so she was so relieved. If she knew that Hu Liancheng was so shameless to enter her room in the middle of the night to watch her sleep. Hu Liancheng had noticed Jian Yun's legs long ago. He reached out to touch her. Hu Liancheng put his entire palm on it. Perhaps he also felt that it was very abnormal. So he tightened his palm and suddenly put his hand on Jian Yun's leg. His other hand grabbed her from under her shoulder and picked her up. Jian Yun slept very soundly and did not sleep at all. So she did not struggle at all and let Hu Liancheng carry her out. Hu Liancheng carried Jian Yun to his bed and let her lie in his arms. He looked at her sleeping face, and after a long time, he sighed in his heart. He did not expect that he would use such a method to truly embrace her. Jian Yun slept until the next morning. This was the first time she had slept so soundly in so many days. In her haze, she habitually rubbed her eyes and found something wrong. Why did she feel that something was wrong? There seemed to be someone next to her, and what was in her arms? Chapter 114, Have You Seen Enough? Jian Yun opened her eyes and saw that she was hugging a man's strong arm. Her mind was still in a daze. She could not figure out what was going on. It was out of instinct. She then looked up and saw a face that made people jealous. Sunlight entered through the gap between the curtains and landed on his face. In the faint light, his nose was straight and straight. His nose was perfectly retracted. Under his thick eyebrows, his usually cold and fierce eyes were closed. He actually had long eyelashes that made women jealous. There was also that thin blade-like lip line. This face belonged to Hu Liancheng. At this moment, his eyes were closed and his breathing was even, as if he had not woken up yet. However, when Jian Yun saw that she was sleeping in the same bed as Hu Liancheng, her head immediately exploded. A layer of cold sweat crawled on her back, and her entire body became stiff. Jian Yun's eyes were full of shock, or more accurately, shock. She stared at Hu Liancheng, completely unaware of what was going on. What was going on? She clearly remembered that she had taken the key and locked the door before she went to sleep last night. How did he get in? No, this was not the room she had slept in last night. This was Huo Liancheng's room. God, then how did she come here? Jian Yun was about to go crazy. Especially at this time, she discovered that not only was she hugging Huo Liancheng's arm like a baby, her face was even close to his shoulder. His arm was hugged by her, so it was pressed tightly against her chest. Jian Yun was scared to the point of breaking out in cold sweat. She hurriedly wanted to let go of her hand, but as soon as Jian Yun moved, she once again felt that something was not right, because she also realized that her right leg was actually on Huo Liancheng's waist. In other words, half of her body was riding on his body. At that time, Jian Yun felt her vision turn black. But this was not enough. Jian Yun had just regained her senses and was about to quietly pull back her leg and let go of her hand. Then, she quietly left this side. Jian Yun was afraid that she would wake Huo Liancheng up, so she was very careful with her actions. However, just as she moved, she raised her head to see if Huo Liancheng was disturbed, but she immediately bumped into a pair of deep black eyes. At this moment, Jian Yun felt as if all the blood in her body was being boiled by a raging fire. It instantly boiled to the extreme, and her face immediately turned blood red. Why am I here? Jian Yun was terrified. You have to ask yourself. You climb up in the middle of the night and hold me, but you won't let me go. It is already very merciful that I did not kick you down. Huo Liancheng's expression did not change as he rebutted. Jian Yun and Huo Liancheng looked at each other for a few seconds. Suddenly, they screamed and jumped up. She did not have time to be careful. She quickly rolled off Huo Liancheng's body and almost rolled off the bed. She covered her face and ran all the way out. Jian Yun was so panicked that she did not see where the door was. She ran so fast that Huo Liancheng realized something was wrong. He could not stop her, even if he wanted to. He saw her crash into the wall and crash onto the ground. Huo Liancheng quickly got up to pull Jian Yun, but she quickly got up and ran out. Huo Liancheng could not help but shake his head. He heard that there was no sound outside, so he picked up the watch on the bedside table and looked at the time. It was already 8:30. In all these years, this was the first time he slept until this time. Putting on the watch, Huo Liancheng stretched his right arm. It was very sour and painful, like an ant biting. His arm was held by that girl as a pillow and as a toy. It would be strange if it was not sour. Huo Liancheng only found out that Jian Yun's sleeping condition was actually so bad. At first, she was very obedient, but later on, she started rubbing against his body in the middle of the night. That leg was also sticking onto his body. If he did not know that she was not interested in him, he would have thought that she was deliberately using this opportunity to lure and seduce him. This night, he really had a hard time enduring it. He knew that her figure was not bad, but he did not expect that she, who was usually wrapped tightly, would actually be so talented. Moreover, the sleeping her was not the same as the little hedgehog who would stab people in the daytime. She was as soft as a cat and sweet. He almost couldn't bear it any longer, and broke down on the spot. Huo Liancheng felt that he had really been poisoned by her. He was so shameless that he wanted to use means to force her to stay by his side. In order to not make her suspicious, he even told those lies. On the other side, after Jian Yun rushed out of the room, she went into the bathroom. She picked up the water and splashed it on her face. She was really embarrassed. She clearly did not have the habit of sleepwalking. Why did she run into his room and sleep with him? It was over. Huo Liancheng did not like her to begin with. This time, he would definitely splash dirty water on her again. Jian Yun's entire body turned cold when she thought of the words he insulted her. But now, only he could help her. She still remembered last night when he said that, as long as she agreed to sign the marriage contract, she would help her mother find the best doctor and use the best medicine. He perfectly grasped her weakness. Jian Yun was looking at the mirror and thinking about all kinds of things. Suddenly, she realized that there was another person in the mirror. A big hand reached out from beside her. Jian Yun was shocked. She quickly dodged to the side, but saw Huo Liancheng reach out his hand to take the toothbrush. He suddenly turned his head to look at her. Jian Yun's heart suddenly jumped twice. She hurriedly lowered her eyes and saw that he was only wearing pants. His upper body was bare. From her angle, she could clearly see the rising and falling muscles on his broad shoulders. He was full of strength like a cheetah. The smooth lines to his waist suddenly tightened and his abdominal muscles became clear. Moreover, there was the legendary mermaid line. His good figure made people's blood boil. Jian Yun could not help but think angrily. This man was really blessed by heaven. Not only did he have a good family background, but he even trained his figure so perfectly. God was really biased. Have you seen enough? Huo Liancheng could not help raising his eyebrows when he saw Jian Yun staring at his waist for a long time. At first she had a stunning look, but later on there was a trace of anger. Ah? Jian Yun looked up. When she saw Huo Liancheng's teasing eyes, her face involuntarily turned red. It was over. Did she have the tendency to be abused? She had just argued with him last night. She hated him to death in her heart. She turned her head but was infatuated with his figure again. Toothpaste. Huo Liancheng did not laugh at Jian Yun. He reached out his hand. Jian Yun looked down and found that when she was brushing her teeth, she had been holding the toothpaste in her hand. No wonder he was staring at her. Here you go. Jian Yun stuffed the toothpaste into Huo Liancheng's hand and turned away with a red face. Go and put on your clothes. Jian Yun had just walked to the door when she heard Huo Liancheng's low voice. She was stunned and subconsciously looked down to see that she was only wearing a silk shirt that was neither long nor short. She was in a vacuum inside and was naked below. When her underwear was faintly visible, she immediately let out a scream and rushed out as if she had been burned. Chapter 115. How to be familiar? Jian Yun rushed into the small suite in one breath. She grabbed her clothes and put them on in a flurry. She had just finished putting on her jeans when she was about to take off her shirt and put on her clothes when she suddenly heard the sound of the door being pushed open. Your ring has fallen off. Huo Liancheng held Jian Yun's ring that was tied with a red rope in his hand and pushed the door open to enter. Jian Yun was halfway through her clothes when she turned her head and saw Huo Liancheng come in. Her pretty face turned pale. She was so scared that she screamed again. She covered her important parts with one hand and grabbed a pillow with the other. She threw it at Huo Liancheng. Get out! Huo Liancheng reached out and caught the pillow. At the same time, he was also very satisfied. He did not get any advantage and still acted obediently. He cooperated very well and turned around to leave. Jian Yun covered her face and threw herself on the bed. She patted the bed gloomily. Why did she always embarrass herself whenever she touched him? They must be enemies. Huo Liancheng stood outside the door. His hand was stroking the ring with special patterns. The corner of his mouth was slightly raised. His eyes also carried a smile. He had indeed pushed the door open on purpose just now. The result did not disappoint him. 10 minutes had passed, and Jian Yun had not come out yet. Huo Liancheng was a little impatient. He reached out to knock on the door. Stop dawdling. Get dressed and come out soon. A moment later, Jian Yun reluctantly opened the door. Huo Liancheng saw her lowered eyes, pouting with a face full of resentment. He could not help but sneer. You have seen my naked body before, so we are even. How is this the same? You are clearly the one who does not wear clothes. Jian Yun looked up and said gloomily. Then how can you explain that you crushed me last night? Huo Liancheng wrapped the red string around his finger and raised his eyebrows. Jian Yun was speechless. She really wanted an explanation. She had slept well, so why did she end up in his bed? I was suppressed by you all night. I didn't even bother to argue with you. I just looked at you. Why are you so petty? Huo Liancheng raised his wrist to look at the time. Although his words were asking for a beating, he did not give Jian Yun the chance to refute him at all. He said directly, Let's go. Otherwise it would be too late. What do you mean by too late? Are you going to work? Goodbye, I'm going to the hospital, Wang Yao said. We're not on the way, I'll go first. Jian Yun carried her backpack and rushed forward. Did you forget something? Huo Liancheng reached out and grabbed Jian Yun's belt and pulled her back. What else? Jian Yun looked back at Huo Liancheng and then looked away. She could not look at him now. When she looked at his face, she remembered that he had pinched her neck with red eyes last night. He was so fierce that he looked like he was going to kill her. She could not have any good feelings for him after he treated her like that. Not only that, but he also scolded her and humiliated her. He threw her into the bathtub. She did not know how to swim. When she suddenly sank into the water, she was so afraid that she thought she was going to drown. Perhaps she had feelings for him in the past, but after what happened last night, she felt that she was right. This man was too dangerous. She shouldn't be so close to him. But for her mother, she could not be willful anymore. She had no choice, so she could only endure. Huo Liancheng naturally noticed Jian Yun's distance from him. He felt a wave of irritation in his heart for no reason. He originally wanted to say a few more words to her, but now he was no longer in the mood. Let's go. One word showed that he was not very happy at the moment. Jian Yun felt the coldness from Huo Liancheng's body, and she did not have the courage to refute him. Moreover, she suddenly remembered that the 1 million yuan check was still in his hands. Last night, he inexplicably asked her to copy the marriage agreement. She went to take a bath and did not see the check. She was embarrassed to ask him in person, and her heart was like a cat scratching. Huo Liancheng walked a few steps forward and saw that Jian Yun did not follow him. She turned around and saw that her eyes were flickering, and her expression was conflicted. She looked at him and wanted to say something, but stopped. What are you waiting for? Huo Liancheng asked. That check. Jian Yun bit her lip and stuttered. Her voice was not much louder than a mosquito's. What did you say? I can't hear you. Huo Liancheng suddenly wanted to tease Jian Yun. He rubbed his ears elegantly and tilted his head to look at Jian Yun. I said that check. How could Jian Yun not see Huo Liancheng's bad nature? She did not care about embarrassment or face and shouted at him. The check is with me. Don't worry. It will not be left here. Huo Liancheng still pretended not to understand what Jian Yun meant. Although he used money to entice her first, he did not want to see her, only see money without him. Jian Yun was angry. She was too embarrassed to ask him for it directly. She was afraid that he would say some dirty things to humiliate her again and again. She could not take it anymore. She was worried that she would not be able to resist and contradict him again. If she angered him, then her predicament would not be solved. Huo Liancheng could not bear to see Jian Yun's expression change again. He walked over and rubbed Jian Yun's head. He shook his head and sighed. I have never seen someone as stupid as you. Jian Yun turned her head to the side and dodged his hand. She frowned and said unhappily, we don't seem to be so familiar with each other. We kissed, hugged, and slept. Isn't this called being close? Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows and narrowed his eyes. He reached out and held Jian Yun's hand. Shall we go to your house or my house first? What are you doing? Jian Yun was still shocked by how Huo Liancheng acted as if nothing had happened. He once again calmly teased her. When she suddenly heard him say that he wanted to go to his house, she suddenly shivered and asked alertly, Get your ID and change your clothes while you are at it. Huo Liancheng said casually. He held Jian Yun's hand and walked outside. Jian Yun could understand him changing his clothes. He was a clean freak. She had never seen him wear the same clothes for 2 days, but what ID was he going to take from her house? However, Jian Yun did not have the chance to ask because Huo Liancheng opened the door. But before they could go out, they saw Pu Zhigan coming over to greet them. Pu Zhigan had tricked Jian Yun to serve Huo Liancheng last night. He was worried that this girl with a strong temper would go against Huo Liancheng. If she did not care about the consequences and angered Huo Liancheng, then his plan would be ruined. Therefore, Pu Zhigan did not go back last night. He had been waiting outside the suite. He was thinking that if Jian Yun disobeyed him and ran away, he would catch her and bring her back. At that time, even if he tied her up, he would give her to Huo Liancheng to enjoy. Fortunately, although there was a dispute in the room last night, nothing else happened. Huo Liancheng should be very satisfied with this gift. Young Master Huo, did you rest well last night? Pu Zhigan carefully observed Huo Liancheng's expression, but President Huo was used to being cold and aloof. He usually did not show his emotions, so when Pu Zhigan looked over, he could not tell whether he was happy or not today.